Real quick, just stepping in to remind everyone that I have a movie channel. Check out my movie channel if you want. It's Jackson Kruger Movies. The link is in the description below, so if you're tired of just hearing my bad sports takes and want to also hear some bad movie takes, make sure you check that out. Again, link is in the description below. All right, 10 best head coaches. You know how this works. You clicked on the thumbnail. I don't need to explain what a top 10 best head coaches list is. Let's just get into the list. Number 10, I did go Sean Payton here, who is someone that, I get the negatives of him. I still think there's a lot of positives. I still think the X's and O's are very strong. I know that it didn't go great last year, but it wasn't a total mess either. I mean, they nearly made the playoffs, had a really nice turnaround in the middle of that season. The Broncos are in a tough spot. I don't expect them to be very good this next year either, but, again, I know people will say, oh, he's just a product of Drew Brees. He owes his career to Drew Brees. Again, first off, go back and watch those games. There's a lot of great X's and O's involved. It's not just Drew Brees. Guys that aren't the best receivers were still getting open pretty consistently. Having Drew Brees certainly helped, but Sean Payton had a better record without Drew Brees. Of course, Brees helped, but it was not all Brees by any stretch of the imagination. So, yeah, I think he's a good coach. I have him at number 10. Number 9 is Mike McDaniel. I think McDaniel and Payton both maybe are lower on the list due to personality reasons at times, but for different reasons. Payton, because people don't like him. McDaniel, because people don't know what to do with that guy. But, the X's and O's are consistently really good. The playoffs hasn't been great. Totally fair. Playoffs hasn't been spectacular, but at the same time, look at the injuries they keep racking up towards the end of the year. Like, I don't know if you put that on him or the conditioning staff or whatever, but it's hard to fully blame him too much for some of the playoff struggles. I think the X's and O's are still pretty good in those moments. I think people have pointed to doesn't make the best in-game adjustments. I think that's the totally reasonable critique, but I still think he's a good enough coach that I'll put him at 9. Number 8, I did put Jim Harbaugh all the way up here at 8. I know that seems a bit high, but again, I made a video where I was kind of talking about could his scheme work, and I went back and watched a lot of old 49ers tape, and I'm like, man, I kind of forgot how good the X's and O's were consistently with this team. I don't watch a ton of college football, but I keep up with it, and you can't help but watch a good amount of Michigan football, just if you're watching any college football at all, because they're always, involved, even if they're not winning national championships. They did just win one last year, though, so, again, I get the complaints of Jim Harbaugh, but I think there's a lot of positives. Number 7, I did go Dan Campbell here. I think Dan Campbell is a really strong head coach. I think you could argue he could be higher. I think the only knock I really have on Dan Campbell, the fourth down decision-making stuff is fine. I don't really... Yeah, okay, there's been the occasional one I didn't love, but that's fine. I'm not going to criticize him for that. The only real critique I have of him is it's not even really fair to criticize him. I just wonder how much of it is Ben Johnson. That's all I wonder. Is it Campbell? I think about, we all thought Dan Quinn was a good head coach, and then Kyle Shanahan left, and Dan Quinn was never the same. I think Dan Campbell has done more than Quinn did, even, with that factor. But, I think it is a fair question of, who is the guy that gets the most credit. Either way, Campbell's still a great coach in terms of, players obviously love him. The game management is really strong 99% of the time. That Dallas game wasn't great. Okay, we get it. But, other than that, it is usually very strong. I think that it is fair to just question that aspect, but at the end of the day, even if the offense is all Ben Johnson, there's still enough good qualities for Dan Campbell. He would be high on this list. I'll put him at 7 for now. Could totally climb the list as we go along. Number 6 is Matt LaFleur, who is a guy that I've just always been higher on, I think, than most people have. I mean, he's someone who is always going to have to live with that NFC Championship decision of deciding to kick a field goal against Tampa Bay instead of going for it on fourth down. That's always going to kind of be something people talk about with him. It just is. But I mean, again, I don't just look at wins and losses for coaches. I try to look at watch the game, see the X's and O's, see what's consistently working. How good are you as a play caller? How good is your staff as play callers? And man, that offense is just always running at such a high level. Defense, not so much. And that's why I can't put him in the top 5 because of that. But I think the other aspect with LaFleur is he's had to deal with a quarterback change now. And he got some of the best years out of Aaron Rodgers. But then once Rodgers leaves, you now have Jordan Love, and you have to develop not just him, but a lot of other young players. And he's done a great job at it so far. So, yeah, you could, I'm sure Lions fans will say that Campbell should be higher. I think they're in the same tier, but I would go with LaFleur. And number 5, Sean McVay. Like, listen, guys won a Super Bowl recently with Matt Stafford, who's a good quarterback and played great in that run. But I think it's fair to say McVay kind of got the best out of Matt Stafford. And I also think it's fair to say that, like, Stafford, who is great, isn't Mahomes. But in the Mahomes era, there have been 3 quarterbacks to win a Super Bowl: Mahomes, Tom Brady, and Matt Stafford. So McVay deserves a lot of credit. It'd be interesting if he played quarterback and won a Super Bowl. That'd be tough. No, I mean, he's done a great job at consistently hiring like great defensive coordinators. Like, multiple have gotten head coaching jobs. Like Brandon Staley, say what you want about him, was great for the Rams. Raheem Morris was great. Wade Phillips, like, consistently doing great jobs there. Of course, we know the X's and O's are amazing. Hard to have, I think more people would say he should be higher than lower, would be my prediction. Game management stuff is brutal. It's awful. It's really bad. He needs to get he needs to play Madden more, needs to get the timeout stuff down. But other than that, great head coach. Number 4, I'm going John Harbaugh. I am. I'm a big fan of the Harbaughs here. I know some people, again, that conference championship game was bad. No denying it. And the playoffs in the Lamar era haven't been great. I think it's been a bit, maybe not quite as bad as people make it out to be. Because, that Tennessee Titans game was a loss. But I think we've learned since then there actually was kind of a specific scheme that hurt the Ravens. And we just didn't know it at the time that the Titans ran. We've played cover one man. Like, the Ravens, struggled in that era. We just didn't realize it at the time. So I don't really, again, maybe you could argue that's coaching. But what are you supposed to do? Like, it worked all year, and then all of a sudden, didn't work in the playoffs. I'm not going to sit here and get too into the weeds of it. You can criticize some of the playoff stuff in the Lamar era if you want. You also then have to give them credit, though, for the Flacco teams that, it wasn't just one fluke year. Like, they probably should have been in the Super Bowl the year prior if it wasn't for a missed field goal. They were consistently playing great football. They beat the Patriots multiple times and even, lost to them, but played them tough other times in that run. You got to give them credit there. But just in general, they're constantly, consistently great X's and O's, consistently a very well-coached team year in and year out. Because of that, I'm going to put him at 4, even with the faults that I do think are mostly fair. Number 3, Mike Tomlin. Again, some Steelers fans were saying he should be fired last year. I disagree. Although I think some Steelers fans were saying it was less of because they think he's a bad coach, but almost he's too good of a coach because he gets you to the playoffs when you're probably not a playoff team. But because of that, then you can't really fully rebuild and become a great team. Okay, that's an interesting thought. Maybe a trade would make more sense in that scenario. I don't know. These Steelers teams have no business consistently going above 500. I don't know how he does it. I don't know what deal he made with the devil, but the way that these teams overperform year in and year out, you have to give him credit, even if, again, there's flaws on his resume. There are, but the good outweighs the bad. Another guy with a Super Bowl, albeit over a decade ago, as well as Harbaugh's was. Number 2 is Andy Reid, which people will criticize. How is he not number 1? Well, I don't love the game management stuff. I know that he's, the clock management thing hasn't reared its ugly head recently, so that's kind of something we don't talk about anymore. But he still is way too cautious on 4th downs. Like, he's usually towards the bottom of the league in terms of going for it and making those types of decisions. Which, if you have Mahomes, you should be number 1. Like, you should be going for it the most in those situations. You should always go for it, basically, with Mahomes. So there's that. The X's and O's are still as good as, I would say as good as anybody except for my number 1 spot offensively. And the defense, again, getting a good coordinator on the other side of the ball, if you're an offensive guy, is really important. And, he's certainly done that as well. Again, plenty to like about with Andy Reid. Having him as my second best coach in football is not an insult, although I'm sure people will take it as one. But I think I'm actually as high on Andy Reid as most people are. I'm just higher on my number 1 guy. It's Kyle Shanahan, who again, there are some critiques. Obviously, the Super Bowl thing is an issue, but again, I mean, you look at he's lost in the Super Bowl 3 times. He's lost to Mahomes twice and Tom Brady once. Like that's part of it. I didn't love every decision he made at the end of that Atlanta Super Bowl at 28-3. I didn't. I didn't think he was the reason they lost it either. I think he made a bad decision or two in that, and there was just 90 things that went wrong for the Falcons in that fourth quarter. And when it comes to the 49ers Chiefs first Super Bowl, the one where they blew the 10-point lead, I actually liked his decision making. Like, Garoppolo missed throws. What are you going to do? Like, I mean, I guess maybe that's why you don't go to Garoppolo, but at the same time, he was playing well for the first 3 quarters, and like I get why he did it. I do. It didn't work out, in my opinion. Again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. There is no head coach in football where you're sitting here saying, sure, okay, this guy, Brock Purdy, is an MVP candidate, but is he actually not even good and only looks good because of the scheme he's put in? Like, no one else you can say that about. And sure, you could say, hey, great receiving core, Christian McCaffrey, all that stuff. That offensive line's not good, but it run blocks well because Shanahan knows how to scheme it up, right? I mean, that's coaching, absolutely. Sure, the receiving core is loaded, but he's made it work with not loaded receiving cores in the past, going back to his Houston days and his Cleveland days. He's made it work. I think he's the best head coach in football. What he gets with, the X's and O's offensively, I think is better than anyone's in football, and that's why I have him at 1. Maybe he's maybe you could argue, honestly, you can't even really argue that he's a product of the, talent that he gets to coach, because, like, he's not. He's obviously not. Like, it's obvious that he's having a huge impact. Maybe you want to say, hey, you can't be 1 until you have a Super Bowl ring. Fair enough, but I still think there's enough good that I'm putting him. And that's a good job with the other stuff. Game management isn't great, but it's not a disaster. And the defensive coaching is always also incredible. So yeah, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.